I think, doctors have that responsibility of, only giving out the right medications, not being pressured. And also at the same time, you're under pressure more from the hospitals or more from the clinics to do more, prescribe more, order more tests because they get paid more. And at the same time, I think I was more thinking, well, I know my patients that, I don't want to charge them for more than they need. That's abuse of power and wrong.
If you've ever wanted to ask a doctor all of the questions and know what goes on behind the scenes, this is the episode for you. It was really intriguing just for me to ask John Lawrence, who has practiced for 20 years and then stopped to become a full-time writer. His book series, Playing Doctor, shares all about what really goes on in residency, medical school, and then, of course, in the actual practice. We talk about natural ways to stop diarrhea, why so many doctors overprescribe pain medications. If you're a parent, we talk about when to bring your children to the ER versus taking care of the symptoms at home. I mean, so many other things. We talk about vaccines for children. Is it right for them? And we just have this great chemistry and conversation. And really, I just pick his brain about what goes on behind the scenes and why physicians just prescribe Ensure, for example. And I mean, I'm just so curious, do they actually get kickbacks from prescribing certain medications or certain things? And he even shares there's a certain powder that can help with SIBO. He used to give it to his patients that had really severe SIBO. And he said this powder was just for the severe ones and it worked like a charm. And I think it's just so interesting to really know all the different tips and tricks. And he does lean more towards a holistic approach to treating rather than just prescribing pills left and right. So this was quite an interesting conversation, and we just kind of go all across the spectrum. I would definitely look in today's show notes because it is more detailed in the topics that we cover so that you can really know what you're about to listen to. So definitely check out today's show notes. And of course, you guys already know this, but you're listening to the Digest This podcast, and I'm your host, Bethany Cameron. Let's get right into the show. If anyone listening right now suffers with acne or any kind of skin conditions, thyroid dysfunction, neurological problems, high blood pressure, or even TMJ, I hate to break it to you, but fluoride in your toothpaste could actually be the cause. Fluoride even contributes to acute high-level exposure. Fluoride has even been linked to abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and even muscle spasms, which is really crazy, you guys. So I know everyone is looking for a fluoride-free toothpaste, and I've been using Bite toothpaste bits for I would say 2 years now, which is crazy. I love them. My husband loves them too. And they have a fluoride-free version, and they use hydroxyapatite, which is it's a non-toxic ingredient that I feel like is getting more attention now. So hydroxyapatite works by remineralizing enamel from within. It just reaches our innermost part of any kind of dental cavity, and it binds to plaque and harmful bacteria in our mouth. And hydroxyapatite is the active ingredient in Bite toothpaste bits fluoride-free toothpaste. I'm sure you guys have heard of Bite. I definitely recommend checking them out. They also have a natural tooth whitening kit as well. They also have a natural teeth whitening kit and mouthwash. So I am offering my listeners 20% off, or should I say Bite is, which I am so grateful for them and this partnership. And if you go to trybite.com/digest, you can get 20% off. You can also use the code DIGEST at checkout to get 20% off as well. So just go to trybite.com/digest or use code DIGEST at checkout. Trust me, you guys, you're gonna love this game-changing toothpaste. And If you don't, for whatever reason, you can cancel at any time. Again, just go to trybite.com/digest. If you guys haven't heard, I just came out with a strawberry flavor to add to my Bethany's Pantry protein powder line. This newest flavor delivers such a robust strawberry flavor without any natural flavorings or artificial sweeteners. And the natural pink color is created by using 100% pure beet and strawberry powder. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but it's actually not required by law that you don't have to list sub-ingredients in a single ingredient. So many freeze-dried and dehydrated fruit powders actually contain a carrier such as maltodextrin or dextrose, which are sugars. And companies add this ingredient to prevent clumping of the powder and keep it, quote, free-flowing. But for me, I know better, and I seek out only the best, purest form of ingredients to add to my Bethany's Pantry products, including our digestive support strawberry flavor. I'm reading through reviews right now, and Gina E gave it 5 stars and wrote, "This is the best protein powder I have ever tasted. I will definitely be buying again. Thank you." And Nancy S wrote, "Strawberry is the best flavor of all 3 flavors." And she also rated and reviewed and gave it 5 stars. And Jennifer C wrote, "Only protein powder that doesn't bother my stomach. I can't live without it." So you can see my protein powder is loved and appreciated by so many, and it's vegan, paleo, keto friendly, as well as suitable for those on a candida or diabetic lifestyle. It's also glyphosate free and contains no gluten, grains, or lectins. Yes, that's right, you guys. We actually remove the lectins from the peas, which is why countless customers message me on Instagram saying after trying other pea protein powders, this is the only one they can actually digest without any issues. You see, it's not only the taste, but the purity and the way we process it without any chemicals that makes it so special and different. So if you're ready to start your journey to a healthier and happier gut and ultimately happier life, head on over to nuzest-usa.com/Bethany's Pantry to grab a tub of the strawberry protein and check out all of the other Bethany's Pantry gut-friendly goodies. Again, that's nuzest-usa.com/Bethany's Pantry to see my entire line of products. You guys are gonna love them and your gut will too. nuzest-usa.com/Bethany's Pantry. Thank you so much, John, for coming on the show today. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's lovely to be here. Such a treat to meet you and be a part of your podcast.
Yeah, so I like to start all of my podcasts out with some rapid fire yes or no questions. So basically, I'm just going to ask you a few questions and you can only answer yes or no, just to kind of get the audience engaged. Are you ready?
This is exciting. Yeah. Okay. Stressed out. Let's go.
Okay, so first question.
Yes, sorry. I'm already messing it up. Yes.
I love it. Okay, so do medical drugs cause more harm than recreational drugs?
I can't say yes and no. Very.
Let me phrase it this way. Can medical drugs cause more harm than recreational drugs?
Yes.
Instead of do. Okay. All right. Is medical school a scam?
No.
Is it true that doctors are more unhealthy than their patients? I should say most, right? Because there's always
boy, yes or no. The answer in the hospital might be very different given the patient population. So it depends on the patient population. I'm ruining your yes or no rapid fire.
Man.
If you look at my doctor population of friends out here in Utah, who are all marathon runners, skiers, bicycle racers, pretty healthy population, and their patients are usually coming to them sick or injured. So tough one. But if you look at maybe the overall, so I'd say in general, doctors are pretty healthy population. Hospital-based,
Okay.
maybe not so much so, certainly
Yeah.
when
I
I
mean,
was
the
there.
stress factor and not sleeping,
Long
especially
hours, not
especially if
sleeping,
you're working
cortisol.
like graveyard versus, that could really
Great point. No,
um
it's certainly, and you're not eating so well in the hospitals. A lot of junk food late
yeah,
night in the
break
hospital.
room. I mean, I've seen it.
Mhm.
All right, last question. Do doctors get kickbacks from Big Pharma and companies like Ensure and other medication brands?
No, that's the quick answer. Back in the day, before I started, such things existed. When I was there, we might get a pen, a really exciting pen, or they'd bring lunch in. Uh, but in terms of direct kickbacks, no, that's been really cut back on. They might try to, um, if you let's say they're testing a drug, they might say, okay, your clinic might receive money if you sign a patient up for a study. It's one way that they can
Mhm.
incentivize to actually include patients into medical studies, but they're not direct kickbacks, no.
Because, I mean, this is just a question because I've been in my family practitioner's doctor's office and I see coupons for Ensure and Try Ensure, and they're just like on the table in the waiting room. And then even my family practitioner, she's like, oh, well, I have samples of X, Y, and Z. Let me just give you some. And I'm just always wondering, like, do you get kickbacks from like recommending these types of products? And I know Ensure isn't really medication, but
But
you
it's a
know,
business. No, that
yeah.
that is a great question, and so the answer is no. You're not. They do drop those off for you. They just say, here's some coupons, and that's more of an incentive to say, consider using our medication. Here's a new medication, or here's Ensure. We'll give you some coupons. That way, your patients, when they walk through the grocery store, might feel more incentivized to buy Ensure compared to
Mm,
the competitor's product because they get 10% off, whatever it might be, $1 off. But at the same time, the drug reps would come in with their medications, try to educate you maybe on a new drug, and at the same time, it was nice sometimes to have samples of the drugs because you had patients coming in who couldn't afford these drugs. If they had to go out and actually buy the antibiotics, that might be a lot of money for them, if they're living check to check. So if you could actually hand them some samples and say, here's what you need to get through, here's what you need to treat yourself, that was nice. But we never received a kickback. At the same time, I had a pretty good relationship with the drug reps. We could talk very openly, and tell them bluntly, why would I write this if I can get the exact same effect from a generic that costs the patient, a few dollars compared to who knows if the insurance will cover this new expensive drug that you're promoting.
hmm Yeah, I've always wondered that because I'm sure my listeners have also seen if they're waiting in the doctor's office or something and they see a rep come in with their suitcase or their little, all their samples, and you just have to wonder, like,
It
okay, what's going
starts to
on in
look
the office back
suspicious.
there? Yeah,
Yeah, no, it starts to
yeah,
sound like somebody's pushing something, and but no, there's no direct kickbacks at all.
interesting. Okay, so you didn't want to go to medical school, but you did anyways, right?
Yes, that was a complicated decision on my part, where the one thing I told my college career advisors that I did not want to be was a doctor. So I didn't take any pre-med classes, didn't have any interest in it. I shouldn't say I didn't have interest. I thought, sports and, things, healthy things was interesting, but I didn't have any plans to be a doctor. No.
Yeah. So why did you go to medical school?
That is a good question. I'm still uncovering the answers to it. I think I had a lot of justifications at the time. I was trying to figure out what to do, had jumped from one career decision to another. And I was living in France at the time. I was guiding some skiing, and I met a doctor who started talking about Doctors Without Borders. And I thought, well, this is pretty interesting. He gets to ski here half the year, does some Doctors Without Borders work. I could live in a ski town, follow up with some volunteer work and do some good. And again, the ends justifying the means. I was hoping this would be something, one, you could have a stable career, always have a job. And I really was interested in writing and other work. So I wanted to have the time to do other things. So it became more of this sounds interesting. And I am interested in health work in general and people's health. But yeah, didn't quite maybe think through the long-term aspects of what it would take to go to medical school and residency.
I mean, because I feel like not everyone that decides to be a doctor is like, yeah, I really want to be a doctor versus like, yeah, I guess I'll just go to medical school. Like, like some random thing. But I'm glad you did because you practiced for how long? Over 20 years?
Around 20 years in practice.
Yeah. And then I want to go into that, but then you stopped to become a writer?
So I was writing all along, and I wanted to put more and more time into it. It was something I just enjoyed doing myself. So I was writing, and I'm actually involved as the medical director of a tech company at the same time. So as I'm looking to do more writing, but medicine was always something that became, after those years of not being sure that's what I wanted to go into, certainly had a really amazing and fun career working in all sorts of different aspects of medicine.
Okay, so you had a family practice, but you also did a lot in the urgent care realm.
Actually,
Correct?
yeah, I did all urgent care. So I did a family practice residency, but
Okay.
went immediately into urgent care and became the medical director of a set of privately owned clinics for
Okay.
around 15 years before opening my own clinic. Yeah.
So share about urgent care because that's completely different than just a regular practitioner with appointments because urgent care is like you don't know what's going to happen that day. And what was your scariest moment while practicing in urgent care?
Okay. So urgent care, at first, I will say, when I first started and was looking for jobs, I thought this would be great. If I do urgent care, I can work a few shifts and then I can have time to do the things I'd like to do. Um, and I had that, but at the same time, it's kind of the doc in the box. But the person that had started the clinic where I first worked, and I met him, it sounded like, okay, this guy really wants to give great care to the patients. And so it's really nice. Over the years, a lot of our patients would come in and say, can you be my main doctor? We actually got into primary care. So I really wanted to say, I'm going to take as much time as it takes with every patient. This is not going to be a rush in, rush out. How many patients can you see as quickly as possible? So we really gave very dedicated care to our patients. But at the same time, exactly what you said, you didn't know if you're going to have 20 patients lined up with everything from kids with colds to lacerations to somebody with chest pain to somebody else who just passed out and you don't know how serious it was. So it was very exciting in terms of the difference in what you might see, the variety of cases, and just having to triage very quickly. And I've always enjoyed that aspect of the medical work, that when things can be very mellow and then also when they get intense, they get very intense. So for that kind of mindset, urgent care was really enjoyable, but at other times exhausting because you could have some very long days and nights. And there's certainly different types of urgent care clinics around the country, but that was enjoyable. In terms of the scariest moment compared to the hospital, you didn't have any major trauma coming through. But I think one of the aspects of medicine is there's different levels of fear. I mean, I think you always live on, you never want to make a mistake or give the wrong treatment. But all of a sudden to have a child brought in who's not breathing well, oh my goodness, your focus. And that's one level of fear compared to an adult. So I think anytime with kids, anytime they had a kid not breathing well or something like that, boy, the intensity was certainly very, very high.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure that's a lot more stressful versus an adult coming in and thinking they have a UTI or something, which is obviously serious, but not as acute, I guess you would say.
Right. No, it's funny you mentioned UTIs. There's certain things that were so easy to treat in terms of your stress level. If somebody can, women know they have a UTI, they walk in and can tell you, I have a UTI. We would certainly check and test. Great, here's the medicine. For a woman having a UTI, you can almost see them lined up in the morning. You're like, oh, you can tell the way she's walking. She's been up all night and miserable and waiting, and they know. So it's not making fun of the severity of what a UTI can be, but you're right. Some were very straightforward to treat. And I'd had times people walk in and they just smash their face into scaffolding falling off a building, and putting them back together was another level of intensity and fear that again, just to do a good job.
Right. Okay. So you also lean more towards a holistic approach in treating ailments, I guess you should say, right? In the medical field, that is your preference. However, I have a question because of your past work. Did you ever feel pressured, like you had to prescribe medication versus giving someone an alternative medicine or advice and not prescribing medication? Did you feel
Absolutely.
like that?
Every doctor would feel it. I had again, I was fortunate, I had a great staff and got along very well with almost all my patients. The most I've ever been yelled at by a patient was for not writing a prescription. And again, I would usually try to be friendly. You'd have patients who would come in and you'd say, I believe this is a virus. I don't think antibiotics are going to treat what's going on here. Let's treat the symptoms. And if you get worse, we can certainly talk about, if you need an antibiotic, let's say. And I having a patient launch into me like I've never been yelled at in my life. I had to walk out of the room. It's the one time I think in medicine, I actually walked out of the room, had to take a few deep breaths before I walked back in and just tried to very politely explain. And I would sometimes tell if the patients were responsible enough, if I felt the patients understood what we were talking about, I'd say, look, here's the prescription for the medication. Wait a few days. I think this is going to get better. If let's say your sinus pressure gets worse and you start having fevers, then yes, maybe start the antibiotic for a sinus infection. But let's hold off. I think if we treat this the proper way, this might resolve itself.
So people actually wanted medication.
And you understood this as a doctor. When let's say, as much as, from both sides of the coin, the doctor's there to help take care of you. And the patients coming in are probably they're sick, they're injured, they're coming to you with a reason, and they're paying a copay, which might be very expensive. And they've been up all night with their kid who's sick. And so they might be saying, I'm coming here to get treatment. I think they want something. They don't want to, have gone through all that, have driven, waited in the waiting room for an hour, paid their copay, and walk in and say, I think it's okay. Go home and take some, give them some Tylenol tonight. So I think there were a lot of times there were expectations that you were going to give them a medication or do something to treat them. Not saying that was what you wanted to do, but I think that was on the patient side or the parents of the patient side. The expectations that you would do something to treat the problem.
Sure. I mean, it's just interesting to me because, so many people in America are on medications, and it's very rare when someone comes into a doctor office and they're like, no, I'm not on any medication.
You're right.
And it's crazy.
It's almost it's almost like, wait a second, what? You're so happy.
Yeah.
When you get over a certain age, if you have an 80-year-old say, no, I don't take anything. I take a few vitamins. And
right. I mean, it's expected. I mean, I went just to get like a checkup. And they asked me, they were like, okay, can you please list the medications? Like it's not even like if you're on medication. They're like, please list the medications you're on. I'm like, I'm not on any. And they're like, what? It was just like weird. And, it's just funny that actually people want to be on medication and maybe they just don't know that there are alternatives. Now, I want to ask you too, like as a doctor, and I've been curious myself that do you have to report to a higher archive, like a higher status? Like if you don't prescribe so many medications within a day or a week, are you scrutinized by some board that they're like, why aren't you prescribing X amount of medication? Let's look into your practice. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
do you feel pressure?
Great questions. I think, and that's why I wrote some books, was to give just some insight into what happens in medicine. So going back to the idea of just everybody being on prescription medications, I think we do need to shift how we look at healthcare. We look at healthcare in this country, or at least, that medicine is seen as treating illness, and that's healthcare. We don't so much look at, hey, let's make people healthy so they don't need to be on medications. That should really be our goal. And I think this has been a great shift in terms of technology, in terms of people like yourself who are willing to share information. We're exploring what is real health. How do we become a healthier country, healthier person, healthier individuals, and all that goes into that. So that requires a big mind shift. And it is happening. We are seeing that even at the medical school level. Some of the classes they're teaching now actually include nutrition. When I went through medical training, it was almost this shocking revelation. We should probably pay attention to what we're using for nutrition in an ICU patient. This was, revolutionary thinking, which should be natural. Nutrition should be the foundation of our health. But in terms of reporting to a board, the one answer is no. That's the kind of the back on the yes, no answers. There's no direct board that comes and says this doctor is not doing enough treatment. If anything, that especially in the last years, they're going to look at you and say, wait, this doctor is prescribing way too many narcotics. There's a lot, more looking at, are they overprescribing the wrong medications? Are they maybe abusing medications? At the same time, within practices, something I experienced was having one of the heads of the clinic walk up to me and say, your numbers aren't as high on some of the things that you're prescribing. I wasn't doing as many, let's say, breathing treatments or prescribing as many different types of splints that they wanted us to give out to patients. And I'd say, fine, look at my medical chart. Show me one single chart where I haven't done the proper care. And they want you to do these numbers. They want you to do procedures because it increases their billing. So if anything, there's an incentive to get paid more if you can charge more. So I think, doctors have that responsibility of, only giving out the right medications, not being pressured. And also at the same time, you're under pressure more from the hospitals or more from the clinics to do more, prescribe more, order more tests because they get paid more. And at the same time, I think I was more thinking, well, I know my patients that, I don't want to charge them for more than they need. That's abuse of power and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think everyone should know really what goes on behind the scenes. So I appreciate you really sharing a little bit of insight in that. Now, I know you have specialized in gut health and treating different gut issues in more of a holistic way. So when you see a patient, when they came in and they had some, let's just say, SIBO or like yeast overgrowth or something like that, first of all, how would you test for that? And then how did you treat that?
SIBO, pretty much the hardest thing in the world to treat in some ways. So we would have patients. I had a clinic. I started with a friend of mine who was an acupuncturist and trained in Chinese medicine, and it was called East-West Health. And so we combined kind of our different knowledge bases and didn't use prescription medications, or not typically what we think of as prescription medications. So we'd have patients coming in more typically with long-standing gut issues. And we would say, we're going to go after the whole body. Great, that's your main focus. Let's work on this. And the first thing we would want to do is testing. So if somebody came in with, let's say symptoms that were typical of SIBO, and usually initially we would do some stool testing, which might hint at SIBO. But SIBO specifically, we usually were doing the breath tests to test for it. And that was at the time the gold standard. This is a few years since I've been practicing with it. And then there was different treatment protocols that we followed with SIBO, whether nutrition changes, eliminating the foods that might be, triggering the SIBO, and using some different holistic treatments to lower bacteria in the gut before starting to replace it again. And oh my goodness, it's been for really tough treatments though. What was that? We had it's a powder that was basically complete meal replacement for several weeks to months, where that was basically had all the different nutrition they needed, but without anything that would feed the SIBO, and it worked. That was, and then you rebuild things back up.
So it was a powder that they mixed and drank?
Yes, I'll get it to you afterwards, but it was one that through a company, but for really tough cases, it was one of the only things that we saw work really well to actually, turn SIBO around, which was, again, like I said, tough cases are so hard to treat with SIBO.
Well, I would definitely be interested in what powder that was. Like, did they only have to eat that, or they just incorporated it into their diet?
You could do both, but the best outcomes were when that was there. It had all the different nutritional values. It was a little too sweet for my taste. I tried it just for a few days to see how it felt. So you received the carbohydrates and the proteins that you needed, and fats. Everything is in there. But at the same time, again, that's reserved for really difficult cases. And we would try different protocols first, but if nothing was working, that was kind of the last resort, and it worked.
I actually get asked quite a lot on my Instagram about what omega-3 oil I take, and if there are any, quote, vegan fish oil supplements out there, Well, I actually don't take any fish oils, and I haven't for a very long time. Once I found out, it's dirty little secret. Literally. I'm not sure if you know this, but omega-3 fish oil supplements often go rancid, resulting in supplements that don't improve your health and can often have a negative effect since you could potentially be consuming rancid oils. So instead of fish oil, try C15 from the company Fatty 15. The fatty acid known as C15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years. And the best part, it is 100% vegan. Fatty 15 is delivering the world's first pure science-backed C15 supplement and has 3 times the healthy aging cell benefits of omega-3 or fish oil. That's crazy, you guys. This special fatty acid is derived from plants using a patented oxidation-resistant technology, resulting in a pure form of C15. It's vegan and contains no flavors, fillers, allergens, or preservatives. C15 is the only ingredient in Fatty 15, which I absolutely love that this company just doesn't add anything else. It's 100% pure. Fatty 15 is also proven to resist oxidation factors both in and outside of the body and works in multiple ways. It repairs age-related damage to cells, protects them from future breakdown, plus boosts mitochondria energy output, and it activates pathways in the body that help regulate our sleep, mood, and natural repair mechanisms for healthier aging overall. This functionality leads to a myriad of exciting benefits now and as we age, namely improved metabolic, liver, and heart health, smoother functioning joints, deeper sleep, and healthier hair, skin, and nails. It comes in a sleek, reusable glass and bamboo jar, and refill capsules are shipped to your door quarterly in recycled material pouches. That's just 4 shipments a year. So whether you're vegan, don't like the taste of fish oil, or don't want to ingest rancid oils that are commonly the case with fish oil supplements, try Fatty 15 to help support and restore your long-term health. And who would I be without offering a discount to the Digest This community? So Fatty 15 has graciously given me the ability to offer you 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit. Just go to fatty15.com/digest and use code DIGEST, and you can cancel anytime, so you're not committed. Again, that's FATTY, the number 15.com/digest, or use code DIGEST at checkout. I have been a long consumer of colostrum for years and have known the benefits it holds for our health. It's been clinically shown to help guard against inflammation and everyday toxins and pollutants. Colostrum intake has also been linked to fewer respiratory tract and GI infections in children and adults. In fact, there are over 5,000 published studies documenting the benefits of colostrum and its ability to optimize health from when we are born all the way through to our elder years. It's even been proven to be 3 times more effective than the flu vaccine. ARMRA colostrum is different from others on the market, and it's something I started taking back in March 2023, long before all the hype. They use a proprietary cold chain biopotent technology that distills over 200 functional nutrients, guaranteeing the highest bioactive integrity and bioavailability. Another thing I personally love about this company is that they only extract and use the surplus colostrum from grass-fed, pasture-raised happy cows that are no longer needing it to supply their young. So you know you're not taking away from animals that need it. Only the surplus colostrum is used, and ARMRA makes sure they are getting only the best from healthy USA cows from family farms. ARMRA has 3 flavors: orange, watermelon, and unflavored, which is my personal favorite because the unflavored has no natural flavors and just 1 single ingredient. And ARMRA is the only colostrum on the market that's casein-free, which is the protein most people with a dairy allergy react to. And for those that do not have a true allergy, but rather have a dairy intolerance, the culprit is usually not the dairy itself, but rather the way that it's processed. All commercial dairy utilizes high heat and aggressive processing for pasteurization and sterilization. Unfortunately, this changes the structural shape of the proteins and destroys the omega fat molecules, rendering them unrecognizable to the body as a food. This is what triggers the immune system inappropriately, leading to intolerance symptoms like digestive complaints, rashes, and inflammation. However, ARMRA's innovative cold chain biopotent technology distills colostrum's over 200 functional nutrients without the use of high temperatures, guaranteeing the highest bioactive integrity and bioavailability. As a result, ARMRA is actually anti-inflammatory and often well tolerated by consumers who typically would have dairy intolerance otherwise. The cool thing is that if you purchase the stick packs specifically and are not 100% satisfied, you can return the product within 30 days of purchase and receive a refund. So if you haven't tried ARMRA colostrum but have always wondered, now's your chance without any risk if you get the stick packs. Or perhaps you already are a user and lover like myself and prefer their canisters. You can still get a discount when using my code. Just go to tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST to receive a special discount for my podcast listeners. That's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST on either their stick packs or canisters to receive a discount. Again, that's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST. Well, so interesting. I feel like so many things are just sweet, and kind of going back to the Ensure, like we talked about. Why do so many physicians prescribe Ensure? Because we all know it's just crap. Corn syrup is I think the first ingredient behind water. Why are so many physicians prescribing those types of drinks or similar ones? It's pretty evident. There's 9 grams of protein. It's better. You're better off drinking protein shakes.
Yes. There's no. I'm not going to justify. How can we justify that we actually subsidize the sugar industry? The government. It's a business. That's the only answer I could give you. There's no health reason why it's done. If I was to give you, if for a lot of people, whether the typical case is going into a patient who can't take care of themselves well enough, who's having a hard time taking time, doesn't have the money to go out, shop properly, to cook. Maybe they can't, whether it's elderly or something where they can just say, we need to make sure this person's actually getting calories. And this might be a very easy, affordable way for them to do so. Are there better solutions? Yes. It takes more time and more help to get them prepared, to teach them to prepare the food. So you're dealing with efficiency and cost and trying to, at some point, just say, these people aren't getting nutrition. Does this have anything in them? Does it cause other health problems? Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, for sure. It causes tons of health problems. And I won't go into it, but it's just something that, my grandmother, she's passed now, but her doctor kept pushing Ensure on her, and it would kill me. And I'm like, Grandma, I'll make you a shake. I'll do some pureed stuff for you. But she was like, no. This is what my doctor wants. And she was so focused because the doctor recommended it and she really wanted to follow the doctor's orders.
No, that's a great point.
Right. And it's like, ugh.
Now, if you had told her doctor, I'm willing to make this, I'm sure the doctor said, oh, that's so much better. Fantastic. Do that. But you're right. Somebody hears their doctor said this, they assume it's good. And the doctor's mind is probably an efficient way to give somebody something else. But there's some major shifts that are required.
Right. Sometimes it's just within the mindset. And I feel like more towards the older generation than the younger, because I feel like now, thankfully, the younger is hopefully waking up. But the older generation, they're just so used to, doctor knows best. And I mean, granted, I am not degrading doctors because I think we definitely need them, obviously. But there are certain types of doctors, and, the older generation just kind of grew up like, just do whatever they say and really not taking their own health into their own hands and questioning things. I think we should all question things if we're following doctor's orders or not.
Absolutely. I think you're very key. You're right. There was a generation that was brought up, the doctors are going to tell you what's best for your health. And they were taught a certain way and they just passed it on. Then we started questioning things, and certainly having wellness blogs, having the ability to research. Remember, this isn't that many decades ago. We didn't have, we had to go to a medical textbook versus Google, which had good and bad information, and sharing information and having other doctors willing to come on and discuss these things openly. And I would always tell my patients, all I can do is make a recommendation. I never said, this is what you must do. I said, here's what I think is best based on these studies. And, let's discuss it. If it doesn't make sense, I wanted them to agree with their treatment. I thought if they understood the care, if they understood why we were doing what we were doing, they'd be more willing to follow it. But absolutely, people should question the care, and if it's not something they agree with, then they should educate themselves. I think you have to be you need to be your own advocate. Absolutely.
Right. And why do doctors overprescribe pain meds? Like, that's how I feel. Like, just pills seem like the go-to for anything and everything, even before looking into natural alternatives. Like, obviously you're an exception, but I just feel like it's just, here's a pill, be on your way. Is it just like an easy out? Are they just too busy to really look into your case? Like, what's the deal?
Okay, yeah, huge topic again. So certainly in medicine, you're taught pharmacology drugs, and that's what as a doctor, you're given the advantage of, a patient can go and get ibuprofen or Tylenol, or the doctor can recommend here maybe an over-the-counter type thing, and there's different natural ways to treat inflammation. When it came specifically to pain medicines, and this became it's an epidemic in the country, unfortunately, for different reasons. Again, you see what's in the news and you realize a lot of people are abusing it. Majority of doctors were trying to use it responsibly, saying, somebody came to them with pain, and so you wanted to help them with their pain. They have a migraine headache, they have a severe injury, or they've had surgery. Let me give them something to help. The thinking was, if the body is in terrible pain and the patient can't sleep, it's not letting their body heal, so we should control this to a level that's acceptable. That was certainly the mindset. Was never, let me just get rid of the patient, let me give them something easy so they don't call me again, so they don't feel anything. It was, I would say most doctors are very responsible in those cases. But again, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of ruses, whether it's people coming in to abuse pain medicine, or patients who have legitimate pain, who have become, let's say, physiologically addicted to these, medicines. They're attaching to their opioid receptors that have increased in their body. The more they take, the more they need. And so I think you have a very difficult time deciding who's in pain, who's not, and what works for one patient doesn't always work for the other. So I don't think there was ever there's certainly, you look at some of the pharmacology companies that made fortunes off these medicines, and you wonder on the ethics of what was behind it. It was a really unfortunate storm of, powerful medicines with vulnerable populations, and in the majority of cases, people trying to use medicines to help support their patients. So, we've certainly seen the result of that in the last decade, though, and it's been a tough one to turn around.
Well, let me ask you, what's your go-to for pain? Like, outside of actual medication, like, what alternatives?
For me personally, I'm somebody who, like you, I've dealt with chronic pain. I don't like taking, any pills. I've certainly gone away from it the more you realize how it affects the body. Even just taking something we think of as innocuous, like ibuprofen or Tylenol, what it can do to the body can be quite severe. So I'm a big fan of ice and heat. I feel like, and rest. Yeah. Those are acupuncture, unbelievable. It can work really well. Again, that's a luxury for those who can, have a good acupuncturist, but it works really well.
What about for like chronic migraines, right? Instead of reaching for ibuprofen or Advil or whatever, like, what would you do?
If you're getting into a chronic migraine, I think you have some on the natural side. You look at, okay, the hydration, the foods. What foods are they doing? They're triggering this chronic situation. Again, migraines can be very difficult for patients and very riboflavin. That's a big one. Magnesium. These are ones that can break the migraine cycle, and at the same time, hopefully, not just get rid of an acute one, but also stop the chronicity of migraine. So there's different studies looking at those are two, I think, strong examples.
Okay.
That work
Yeah,
well.
I mean, everyone is always looking for alternative things for pain, whether that's like inflammation.
We go
Now,
to the turmeric and cloves. I know are the ones we typically look at. Do those always work with a migraine type? Tough. It depends on the severity of those migraines.
yeah. Okay, so what about diarrhea? Because I feel like a lot of people maybe, they have some remedies for constipation, but if someone is having diarrhea, like right now, I know in California, at least the norovirus, like I just recovered from it.
Mm.
And that is just like taking over. And if people don't know what the norovirus is, and it's basically a really bad case of the stomach flu. You have diarrhea for days. Do you have any natural remedies to stop diarrhea?
Well, the first thing is certainly to figure out what's going on, what's causing it. If you know it's a norovirus, if it's chronic. I know you've dealt with this yourself. When patients get told, "Well, you've got IBS, deal with it. Here's some different pharmacological things you'll take for the rest of your life." I think you need to figure out what's really going on. What's actually causing the underlying situation. Where is this inflammation in your gut coming from? Typically, diarrhea is coming from something, let's say a virus in the norovirus case, causing inflammation in the gut itself. And so it's not absorbing, water is, basically being carried through the body instead of being absorbed into the body, and so that system is being disrupted. So the first thing is, one, treating the underlying cause always. In this case, in a norovirus, it usually needs to run its course. That's what the diarrhea, this is your body. I mean, again, sometimes we try to interrupt the body's system, and the body is so elegant when you look at it and go, it's naturally doing what it's supposed to do. It's using diarrhea.
It's getting rid of it.
It's getting rid of. So you have patients who would, let's say, take Imodium over the counter. I've had this diarrhea. They don't want to, they have go to work. They don't want to deal with an episode or two of diarrhea. They take Imodium, which then holds the norovirus in their body. It builds and builds and builds, and it makes the symptoms worse. They're going to get more cramping, increase the length of the infection. So the first thing is sometimes letting it run its course, and you have to decide at what point is that dangerous. If somebody's younger, we have children who can become dehydrated more easily. So it's always looking for signs of dehydration, replacing the electrolytes that you're losing and the salts that your body loses to basically pull fluid out of your body. So that's when you get into natural, let's say, electrolyte replacements and making sure you're staying hydrated so that symptomatically you're okay. Because if you have diarrhea, besides it's annoying, you have to run to the bathroom more frequently, it can cause other issues and irritation, let's say. It's how your body's getting rid of the diarrhea. Now, at some point, if it's becoming dangerous, you need to control it, then there are, let's say, over-the-counter medications. I'm not sure. I mean, naturally, in medical school, you're taught the brat diet, bananas,
Sure.
rice, applesauce, toast, or things like that to try to just, less inflammatory foods or foods that might, continue the irritation.
Right. Or like
the,
to soak up the
right, absorb
excess.
things, get a little bulkier. And then at the end of that, sometimes, repairing the gut itself. So things that help, whether it's everything from marshmallow or vitamin D or the prebiotics, again, rebuilding the gut after it's had a severe, let's call it damage or injury or, inflammation that's been triggered.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still trying to recover my gut because it got wrecked from the norovirus. I mean, it was
wow.
It was horrible. So I'm still like, I feel like my gut is just torn up and it's still like repairing, something that I've looked into, I don't know if you've noticed or heard of this, but carob powder. If you mix carob powder with like some yogurt, it actually can really help with diarrhea. Have you heard that?
You know what? I'm so glad you said that. Like I said, it's been a few years since I've been medically treated. So I'm glad I'm like, you're right. Carob, great one. Yes. I've seen actually really great results with that.
Yeah.
So,
especially for kids too. I mean, it kind of
right,
tastes
they
like
don't mind it.
chocolate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So carob and yeah.
Well, let's go into kids a little bit. So for all the moms out there, when when should you take your children to the ER versus taking care of the issue at home? Like, when is that turning point of like, okay, actually, this is severe, I should take them, versus like, okay, no, I can deal with it at home. Like, what are some signs, some advice?
Okay, so my general note with any children to parents was always reassuring every parent, you are never, ever overreacting to bring your child in. So I think because, especially with smaller children, they can't tell you exactly what they're feeling. So it's harder to assess what's going on. Their reserves aren't as great, whether it's their lung size, their oxygen, their fluids. They can become dehydrated very quickly. They can have breathing problems very quickly, and there's nothing you can do. So anytime you're concerned about your child, they're not acting right, whether it's behavioral, mentally, or physically, something's not right. Call your doctor, get in, be seen. You're never. Trust your gut is. Certainly parents know their children, I think, and so if you're ever concerned, go in. The biggest ones we look at certainly are ones I just mentioned. Any sort of breathing problems, any sort of signs of dehydration, lethargy. Children not acting right. So it's hard to have straight rules, when to go and when not to, every time you have I've had parents who come in every time their child has a slight runny nose. They come in and say, they cried for, a few minutes last night. What's going on?
What about a fever? Like, when is it like over the top fever, like 99 versus, something a little bit more serious?
Right. Now, typically we would think that, fevers that are getting into that, this is not a rule at all, but I'm just saying, once you have a higher fever into the 103, 104, those are pretty concerning. Usually, kids can spike that high and be fine. And then they can also, but typically that's a sign that there's usually a more serious underlying concern going on. Again, you have to look at the fever as a symptom. You can get fevers from different things. And so, everything from growing pains or, teething can cause fevers. So that's why with the children, you have to assess, how's the child doing? Overall, okay, they've got a fever and they look sick. Well, good sign to go in. But I wouldn't, hard to put an absolute number of this fever, this number go in, this number don't. You really have to look at the patient as a whole. And again, trust that if you're concerned something's not right, there's no reason to hesitate.
Well, that's a good point too, when you said, if they're teething or not. I am not a parent myself, so I've never experienced this, but I know, like, if I had a child, I'd be a little bit more overprotective and be like, oh my gosh, like, what's happening? But at the same time, I would want to try and go the more holistic route, because I do know that fevers can be actually helpful. You want that, because that fever is really just trying to kill off what's happening. And that's like the body's natural mechanism. Now, obviously, if it's too high, I'm not going to just like let my child have a fever, but you see what I mean? Like, so.
Absolutely.
But what would be some advice? Like, okay, let's just say, like, if your child is teething, you're like, okay, yeah, they're teething. Oh, they have a fever. This is probably teething. Like, how would you know?
Teething is so tricky. It's especially, like I said, parents with their first child, because teething can cause congestion, runny nose, they're crying. And so they're 6 months old. They can't tell you much more. You're going, oh my goodness, they've spiked a low-grade fever. They've got a runny nose, or they have a cold or something I should be worried about, which, when they're children, they're lying back, they're coughing. If you can obviously, the typical statement was, you can feel, let's say, a tooth coming in. And again, if it's, let's say, those lower numbers and they're just a little fussy, but they calm down, they can sleep, they're nursing, they're still eating. So in general, they're acting normal. That's when you can say, okay, it seems like they're mostly normal. They're having these little moments where they're fussy and the temperatures are going up, but overall they look good. You might feel better. And again, it's easier once you've had your second or third child. You get a little bit more comfortable with that.
Is it probably just best to take them in and then have the doctor say, oh, don't worry, they're teething, go home?
I think if you're concerned, again, I think some parents are just naturally more comfortable saying, okay, majority of the time they're acting okay. And other parents, peace of mind is worth bringing them in. If they're worried, if for some parents, if they're just that little bit nervous, again, I don't think it's overreacting to bring them in. Now, this gets into all sorts of, personal trickier decisions. Do you want to go to a pediatrician's office in the middle of the, flu season, virus season, have your child exposed to what's going on in that waiting room. And luckily, since the pandemic, there's more, let's say, ways to communicate with your doctor. If you can actually have a call with them, quick video conference and explain what's going on and feel better about, okay, I feel better. I'm going to watch them for another day. And it sounds like this fits with, the timing of teething and other symptoms. You maybe feel better. So parents' peace of mind is pretty important too. And so I think it depends on your relationship with your doctor and understanding it, because it's so hard to know with children. Like I said, they can't, is it an ear infection or are they teething? From the outside, they look the same. Until you actually look, you don't know. So.
And what's your opinion on children's vaccines that are so often forced on kids these days? Because I know a lot of my listeners, a lot of them are parents, and I'm sure a lot of them want to go the more holistic route in treating their child and bringing them up. And a lot of them may not want their children to get all the different child vaccines that are they're forced on kids. It's like a non-negotiable now for doctors. It's like, oh, yep, it's time for your whatever vaccine. So what's your opinion on them, first of all? And second question, how can a parent navigate and take action if they don't, want to vaccinate their kid?
Okay. So I know you could potentially lose like half your listeners. I know this topic is so heated, and it shouldn't be as heated as it is, because I think everybody wants to do the best for their children. We want to be healthy.
And no shame to anyone if they have vaccinated their children. I believe, I was vaccinated as a child,
Here's what I tell everybody. I'll give you my take on it. And this might be one of the few places where if I lean one direction, I believe in vaccinations. Do I tell, when people come to me and say, I say exactly what you say. I say, everybody has to make their own decisions. This is, I think people need to be comfortable. I think they should be educated. The more educated they are. And again, you get bias when you try to, confirmation bias. People look for what they want to hear. They find the articles that they believe in and say, oh, that's accurate. I think vaccinations have played a very important part in the overall health. If we look back many years and look at some of the infections that people became sick with, we certainly look at people who today walk with a cane, limp because they had polio. We don't deal with polio anymore. We haven't dealt with what, severe outbreaks of smallpox did to people. We don't, common Haemophilus influenza, which causes a common cold, used to cause deafness in children and more severe injuries. And it doesn't anymore because we've used vaccinations. And then at the same time, you're right, boy, you walk in and all of a sudden they're going, hi, we're going to give your child, 7 different vaccines today. It's like, wait, are they safe? What are they receiving? How do they all work together? So, there's different ways of looking at it. There's everything, as you mentioned, from choosing not to vaccinate to accepting what, your doctor, which is going to have his or her own view on what's, following protocols, to, they can spread the schedules out. So they're getting vaccinations over more spread time. And maybe I personally sometimes become wary when, oh, here's a new vaccine. Do we all need that one?
Mm-hmm.
Do we all need to get
it's not like well researched yet. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, well, but some of the other ones have certainly been out there for a long time. And I think when I look at the cases of people saying these vaccines cause problems in, let's say, one specific child, yes, there are inherent dangers in a lot of what is commonly over-the-counter medications, let alone a vaccine. But for the greater good, like I said, this is one time when I lean towards a little bit of Western medication. I think vaccines have provided a lot of improvements in overall health and wellness for the greater population.
So it's now 2024. And COVID happened 4 years ago, which is crazy. Like, I feel like
surreal, right?
It wasn't 4 years ago. That's just how I feel, right? But 4 years afterwards, were you practicing during COVID, or did you stop and you were full-time writing?
This was the crazy timing. I was right when COVID started was exactly when I had just stopped practicing. So I stopped December 2019. I had just walked away from my clinic, and February 2020 is when we're watching it start to explode across the world. And where we are here in Utah, I decided, okay, morally, I feel like I'm going to have to go back. I've waited 20 years to move on. I felt like I've done my time. I can now really pursue something else. I'm excited to dive more fully into some different opportunities. And if it had become as severe as it had, let's say, in New York or other countries, I certainly would have felt obligated to volunteer my time back in the hospitals and listening to my friends who were working the shifts they were working. It was certainly really rough. So instead, I bought a bunch of suture material and other home test kits so I could at least offer patients, if people needed help, I could maybe help treat people without them having to go to the hospital and avoid
Wow.
So it was interesting. I thought, oh my goodness, I finally have the opportunity, and I've worked towards leaving, and now I'm going to be called back. So
Literally like a month before it came, you
yeah.
stepped
So in
down.
some ways I felt so good, like, oh, I can be home with my family, which is very nice. And I think I would have felt obligated to sleep in the garage if I'd been working in the hospital at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a crazy time now. We know so much more now. And I mean, things are coming out now. It's just like the typical flu because, I also do believe that it has downgraded. It wasn't as, if you get like COVID now, it's just like a typical flu versus like
Right.
the first strain, which was a little bit more intense.
And coronavirus had existed. I mean, we all, as doctors, it was a list of one of the viruses a person might have. That was just a common virus, a common cold that you didn't do anything about. It was just that strain that became, like you said, we've learned so much since then, but, we certainly all lived in fear for a while until we understood what was going on.
Right. So I keep like picking your brain because I feel like it's just so interesting that for people to know. So what goes on? I know you worked more in urgent care, but can you share any interesting things about what goes on behind the scenes in hospitals? Like what's actually
What are they doing behind those
happening?
doors?
Yeah.
Um, okay, I will say this. I had a very atypical, medical experience, let's say, because one, I never really planned on being a doctor. I was very fortunate to be able to, that I was accepted. I then went to medical school and had, right before medical school started, I had two significant head traumas. Around 3 or 4 weeks before medical school started, I woke up in the hospital with a bleed in my brain from a bike crash. And 3 weeks later, the exact day before medical school started, I had it happen again. I had another bike crash, another concussion. So I had what's called second impact syndrome, which can cause severe swelling, can actually kill you, but really cause some bad, I could barely stay awake. I was having terrible headaches. I couldn't remember anything. I would turn the page in the book. I was like, I don't even know what I just read. I have no idea what subject I'm in even. So I had this really more entertaining start to medical school, I think, than most people, who are just trying to do well. And I'm going, I'm trying to stay awake. I'm trying to, so I think I had a mindset going in, a different point of view. So and people would say, I always try to smile through almost everything in life. I really try to take the best of it. So I just made the best of it. That said, so I think I was in the hospital looking at what goes on behind the scenes and writing these stories. So that, the books I wrote were more, fun stories. And from my point of view, of somebody who was seriously struggling just to get through, and then always felt like I was a few steps behind and having to review and having to catch up. And, it was scary enough. But the one thing I always say was, the hospital is an amazing place. People are working so hard. I think it's easy for people to say they were frustrated with their medical experience, or, you hear about the people who didn't have a good experience. The doctors, the nurses, they work so tirelessly to give the best care they can. There's so much effort put into, every patient case getting, discussed ad nauseum between the different groups of doctors, the residents, the students. So it's when you see it from that side, there's a real, this is a caring group of people who are working hard. Sometimes with all the stress and everything else going on, you certainly do it through laughter and joking around and trying to get through the day. But there's, overall, maybe not where your question wanted to go, but it's really a great group. At the same time, I'm not sure if you're thinking more like, how do the doctors view the patients, or more how do training hospitals work with residents and students? I know that sometimes intimidates people. Like, who are the actual doctors walking into my room? Who's actually taking care of me here?
Yeah, I mean, it was more of like just a general question. I mean, it was pretty broad, but I think like you're right too, as far as I'm definitely not anti-doctor. We definitely need them. If I am in a car
when
crash,
you need it's good to have.
oh yeah,
Exactly. Right.
I'm going to the doc. I'm going to the hospital if I need a doctor, right?
Yeah.
But to that aspect, I feel like it's more needed like for acute symptoms versus like I don't know. I don't even want to say, but there's
You're
a
right.
time and place.
There's a time and place, and for you when you have a car accident, yep. I've said the exact same thing. I know exactly where I'm going to go if you have that type of
For
trauma.
sure. And I totally appreciate all the doctors out there. And that's what I really like, because you have a book series, right? It's Playing Doctor.
Yes.
And share a little bit about what is in your series, because I love the title too, Playing Doctor. So like, what do you share in these?
So this was, these came out of, I used to, again, probably what you were asking, what goes on in the hospital. I used to, 3 a.m, you're staying awake in the hospital as a resident or medical student. And you've just seen the craziest things happen all day. Things that you're going, my friends are not dealing with this. They're not walking around the hospital with an amputated leg or having somebody walk in bleeding to death and or so sick. And as a resident or medical student, half the time you're trying to figure out what's going on. Are you doing the right job? You're terrified in some ways. You're trying to fit in. And so I wrote these emails out to friends, just describing the days more as just entertaining stories of what had happened that day. Some of the entertaining patients who had taken care of. And so, and then somebody asked if they could publish them. And I said, I'll just write the whole thing. So the first book was medical school. The second one goes through residency. And then the third one is chief resident, where you're actually in charge. So you kind of get to go through medical training all the way from zero medical knowledge whatsoever, just trying to get into medical school. And then as you learn along the way, you kind of go on my journey of really having no idea what's going on and jumping from rotation to rotation, because every month you're on a different rotation, which has a different vocabulary and different patient population. So you're constantly just about getting to feel like you fit in and you know what you're doing. And the next day you start a brand new job with a brand new team, with brand new nurses who all think you're inept. And so it was just this constant flow of, an entertaining learning experience, and very much an apprenticeship for all those years. So I wanted patients to maybe, or not patients, people to see. I think we all have some knowledge of the medical world. None of us have really probably gone through life unscathed without an injury or an illness or a friend or family's illness. So we've all experienced the hospital or clinic. So I was just kind of sharing the training behind it and what actually goes on and how we, take care of people. And hopefully people can understand then the medical side, feel comfortable walking in and talking more openly. I think so many people feel they walk in and they're just going to be told what to do, or they feel intimidated by the process, and realizing this is just people too, who are here trying to, do their best to help you.
Yeah, I think your books are a great way to give people insight of really what truly does go on behind the scenes from a doctor's standpoint, and also just medical school and residency. And I'm sure you share just the good and the bad.
there's a lot of the good and which goes wrong, and there's the things that were done wrong that we're sad and hard to see. You see all sides. Yeah. So I was really, hopefully I see it as people can read it more as entertaining and learning about a world that we all partake in, more than it's not a medical lecture in any sense. So.
Yeah. Well, everyone should check out your book series, Playing Doctor. Now, before we go, one last question. What was the best advice you were ever given as a doctor?
Listen. That was, this plays in every aspect of life, I think, right? In relationships, if we actually listen to each other, if we, as I remember, it's like, I love acting, got to listen to the person you're acting with. But in medicine, you really have to listen to your patients, because it's so easy, as it is in life, to hear somebody start saying something or see what on their chart, what they're coming in for, and you already have your answer. You kind of hear what they're saying, and you say, well, here's what you're going to do. Take this. You start assuming what it is. You have to listen. And from on the medical side, even just from a practical standpoint, one of the lessons you learned was, patients will sue their doctors because they felt like they weren't heard. That was the number one reason. They felt like the doctor didn't listen to me. Rather than, they might have had something going wrong, but if they felt like the doctor heard them and did the best, explained, and they had a good conversation, far less likely ever to bring a lawsuit against a doctor. But on the much more, it's important to practice good medicine, important to be a good person, you've got to listen to your patients. They tell you most of what's going on. We have what we call history and physicals. You listen to a patient's medical history when they tell you about their illness, and then you do the physical exam, and you're taught, look, 80% of the time, you can figure out what's going on from the history. The physical might just be confirming a few things. So you really have to listen, one without bias, because you'll jump to the wrong things. But certainly patients will tell you what's important. When a mother comes in or a father parent comes in and says, I don't think this doctor listened to me. I'm coming back in because they didn't hear what was going on with the kid. They're saying something was missed, and they're upset because, again, you got to hear and say that was okay. They're telling me that there's something going on I should pay attention to. So anyway, like I said, I think it works in all aspects of life. We really should be listening to each other.
Boy, well, I would love it if you were my doctor. So
Well,
I'm sure
thank
all
you.
my listeners would agree. Well, where can people find you on social media if they want to check you out?
I'm so bad. I'm trying to get better about social media. I keep saying that's it. It's at John Lawrence, at John Lawrence Writer is my Instagram account. And I'm going to start trying to post daily some stories from these books. The audiobook version is just about to come out too, the book. So
love it. Well, I'll make sure that we put all those links in today's show notes so people can easily access them with a simple tap. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been just a pleasure to have you on, and I appreciate your time and sharing your stories.
Thank you, Bethany. It's been great fun talking with you, and keep doing what you're doing. I love that. I mean, I've been reading up on your work and what you're doing on nutrition. It is so important. I think you asked me what I was taught as the most important lesson. What I learned in my practice, nutrition by far plays the biggest part in people's health. There is no question. The biggest change people can make if they start eating better, it changes their entire wellness, their entire health. I mean, so what you are doing is so critically important.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Digest This. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app to let us know. If you're ever wondering how you can support me and this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family is the best way. This is a Resonant Media production produced by Drake Peterson and edited by Mike Fry. To email the show, message us at digestthispod@gmail.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.